Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating conversation between Beck and Kevin O'Leary. And what we're looking at is the massive, tangible, boots-on-the-ground infrastructure that is absolutely required to power the abstract world of artificial intelligence. You know, when we talk about AI, we usually just picture lines of code, the cloud, or some invisible futuristic software, right? But as this discussion totally reveals, the reality of the cloud is incredibly heavy, it's incredibly expensive, and it is deeply, deeply physical.
So, to set the stakes for us, listen to this quote from Beck. He says, "I believe that AI is one of the greatest tools man has ever created, but we must always remember it is a tool. And to have the compute power, we have to have data centers." I mean, he hits the nail on the head here. AI might be this amazing digital creation, but it requires incredibly massive physical data centers to actually do anything. We literally can't just wish AI into existence. It takes hardware, it takes land, and it takes a staggering amount of resources to run the systems that are pretty much becoming the backbone of our whole modern world.
All right, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The geopolitical compute race. 2. The AI power reality. 3. Impact on local communities. 4. Water and infrastructure solutions. And finally, number 5, future tech and scale. Okay, let's jump right into section 1, the geopolitical compute race. We're going to start by looking at the immense global pressure that's actually driving this huge infrastructure boom. Now check out this staggering contrast that O'Leary points out. In just the last 18 months, China has been aggressively accelerating its AI capabilities by building 400 gigawatts of new power. And they're doing this primarily by firing up coal-burning turbines. Basically, the government gives the order and the power gets built instantly, without any environmental permit delays. But then, look at the US. In stark contrast, the United States has built exactly 0 new gigawatts of power for this specific effort in that exact same time frame. 0. It really frames the AI race not just as some friendly software competition, but as an urgent, highly competitive global infrastructure race. Moving right along to section 2, the AI power reality. This brings us to a crucial realization about what all this AI infrastructure actually means for our local power grids. And honestly, the whole issue boils down to exactly what O'Leary says right here. Data centers aren't really about data centers, they're about power. It's a brilliant distillation of the whole problem. Think about it. Without power, there is absolutely no compute. And without compute, your cell phone stops working, cell towers go completely dark, and the modern economy just grinds to a halt. The thing is, our national power grid is currently tapped out pretty much everywhere, which makes power generation the single biggest hurdle in this entire AI race. So, because the grid is already spread so thin in states like Utah, Virginia, Mississippi, and Tennessee, local folks are understandably terrified that dropping a massive data center into their town is going to make their personal power bills skyrocket. To solve this, O'Leary outlines what he calls a new rule of engagement for hyperscalers. You know, the massive tech giants like Microsoft, Google, or SpaceX. Basically, if they want to build in a community, they've got to bring their own power. They literally have to spend billions to generate their own electricity, guarantee that local residential bills won't go up 1 cent, and, get this, actually give some of that excess generated power back to the national grid. It's the only way to keep things competitive. All right, section 3, impact on local communities. Let's zoom in from the national grid down to the ground level where local farming communities are, naturally pretty anxious about these giant corporate footprints showing up in their backyards. Beck brings up a very real, very common fear here, that these shiny new data centers are just going to extract local resources and won't actually create any long-term jobs for the people who live there. But O'Leary pushes back hard on this. He argues that these projects actually bring massive economic benefits. For just a phase 1 build, he cites 4,000 construction jobs just to get the thing off the ground. And after that, 2,000 permanent, highly paid engineering and support jobs to keep it running. Plus, to support that kind of workforce, these tech companies have to invest heavily in the town itself. We're talking funding new fire trucks, building hotels, and supporting local schools. He even points to Utah specifically, noting how the highly educated workforce near Hill Air Force Base makes it a literally perfect talent pool for these types of tech jobs. Let's move to section 4, water and infrastructure solutions. Because beyond jobs, we absolutely have to talk about resources. And the single most contentious issue for places like Box Elder County and Utah, water. Especially when you factor in the receding Great Salt Lake. A lot of people are terrified that a new data center is going to just drink the entire lake dry. But O'Leary drops a reality check here that is just mind-blowing. The number one, a modern, massive 1.4 gigawatt data center uses the water equivalent of exactly one single golf course in Utah. Just one. When you put it into that perspective, comparing a multi-billion-dollar economic engine to a single local golf course, the resource footprint suddenly looks entirely different, doesn't it?
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth is that even possible? Because look, 15 years ago, data centers in places like Virginia definitely earned a terrible reputation for guzzling up insane amounts of water. But today, water usage has plummeted, all thanks to modern engineering. These new servers use what's called a closed-loop cooling system. It works a lot like your car radiator. It circulates a fixed, locked-in amount of coolant to keep the chips from melting down without constantly pulling in and evaporating fresh water. When you combine that tech with modern air-cooled power generation, the water consumption drops to just a tiny fraction of what it used to be. It's a real game changer. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Future Tech and Scale. So, okay, if the water is manageable now, and these companies are bringing their own power to the grid, how exactly do they generate all that energy from scratch? According to O'Leary, the tech stack that these hyperscalers are demanding today relies on a highly specific hybrid approach. They can't just plug into one thing. It actually starts with natural gas. They tap into existing infrastructure, like the Ruby pipeline out in Utah, which right now is only running at a fraction of its actual capacity. That natural gas fires up air-cooled turbines. But wait, during the day, they massively supplement this by utilizing those wide-open semi-desert environments to build gigantic solar panel farms. And here's the cool part. That solar power isn't just used immediately. It charges huge fields of sodium-lithium batteries. And those batteries are what fuel the data center's intense nighttime operations. It is a completely self-contained, multi-billion-dollar energy ecosystem. Which logically prompts a great question from Beck. If they need so much self-contained power, why aren't we just building nuclear plants? Well, the answer comes down to pure, hard global economics. Let's look at the cost per kilowatt hour. Saudi Arabia is sitting at the absolute bottom at roughly 1 cent. Though, dropping a $15 billion investment there carries some heavy geopolitical risks. The Nordics and Canada sit at around 4 cents, while places in the US, like Utah and Texas, are between 4 and 6 cents. But look at the bottom row. Right now, current nuclear energy would cost roughly a full $1 per kilowatt hour. It is vastly, vastly too expensive right now to be economically viable for these AI builds. Now, both O'Leary and Beck agree we eventually need to return to nuclear, and maybe smaller reactors are 11 to 15 years down the road. But the AI race is happening today, and it simply cannot wait for those economics to balance out. Nearing the end here, Beck asks another really practical question. Why can't we just shove these servers into old, empty car factories in places like Detroit? O'Leary explains that it all comes down to a staggering, frankly unbelievable shift in scale. Literally just 2 years ago, a large data center was about 250 megawatts. Today, because these AI chips are so powerful and cost billions of dollars, the absolute minimum scale required to make these facilities economically competitive against global adversaries is 1,400 megawatts. That's 1.4 gigawatts. That is almost a 5-fold increase in physical size in just 24 months. An old factory in Detroit literally does not have the physical footprint or the power grid or the infrastructure to support an operation of this magnitude. And that leaves us with a really profound realization to take away from this explainer today. The cloud, this thing we think of as abstract and invisible, has a very heavy, very permanent physical footprint. As the geopolitical race for AI dominance heats up globally, this massive, multi-billion-dollar infrastructure is heading directly for our own backyards. It demands land, it demands power, and it requires highly negotiated community agreements. The software technology is already here, but the physical foundations are being poured right now. So we really have to ask ourselves, when the tech giants come knocking, is your town ready to negotiate its future? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.